All right, we're back. We're going to connect some things. We're going to be connecting this. So we're excited to get started here. We've got a special guest this week who's going to join us for most of the hour, I think. But I'm Chris Mitchell with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. I'm back from my, 7th or 8th straight week of travel. I am in no way fried as I prepare for next week's 7-day trip that starts on Thursday for the Tribal Broadband Bootcamp. Southern California, we're building a 1,000-foot fiber network underground and lighting it up and showing everyone how it works and breaking it and fixing it and all kinds of other fun stuff. So I've been learning Calyx today. The folks at Calyx have been wonderful in teaching me about the E7 platform and how I'm going to set it up myself. So with that, let me introduce our crew because we got a lot of stuff to get through today. I'm going to start with Kim McKinley. Welcome.
Thank you. Chris, not going to say this in a mean way, but you kind of look like you're a little fried. That hair of yours, kind of like mine. So I'm reporting to you from Jupiter, Florida today. So I am excited to be here. So thank you for having me, Mr. Christopher Mitchell.
You went down for Metro Connect and now you're just hanging out or what?
Yeah, I have I'm staying at a friend's house. So,
Nice.
I'm just giving some vacation days in. We get to vacation in the broadband industry once in a blue moon.
Yes. I'm going to do that to see the eclipse. So excited for that. It comes on my son's spring break week, so it's perfect. Speaking of Metro Connect and people that are enjoying Florida weather, Travis Carter from Minneapolis, where it is bright and sunny. Welcome.
And I think 62 tomorrow, right? March 2nd.
I'm shooting a baseball game tonight outside.
I would like to thank Kim McKinley for buying dinner at Metro Connect. Very, very, very nice of you. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say, yes, you're welcome. You're welcome, Travis. I know that Chris has never bought you dinner, but you're welcome. Yes, I just want to congratulate myself. Yes.
Yes. Oh, shout out to Kim McKinley and bringing a lot of broadband credibility to me at the Metro Connect show. So thank you.
Travis, anytime you want to go out for nacho, I'll be happy to buy you dinner. I won't buy plural nachos, but singular, I'm up for it. Nacho.
We've been hearing that threat for years.
And then the last member of the regular crew, Doug Dawson, welcome back from CCG Consulting in Asheville.
I am not in Jupiter, Florida today, but this week I feel like I'm in Jupiter. So here we go.
Well, the lag is pretty good, so there must be some breakthrough in physics. We got Gigi Sohn as our special guest this week. Thank you so much for coming in, Gigi.
Well, I'm honored to be with this group. Friends, colleagues, and some of the smartest people in broadband. So I'm delighted to be here, and I can't wait. I'm hoping, Chris, I think you did offer me a sort of semi-regular slot, and I've accepted. So hopefully you've still offered it to me because,
yes,
like I said,
well, now I have. No, yes, with the American Association for Public Broadband, but also with a lifetime of public service and telecom background. So welcome. We're going to pull you into the rotation.
And Gigi's probably going to retract her acceptance of coming on regularly after this show. So we understand that.
All right. We're going to be covering a bunch of stuff today. We're going to talk briefly about Metro Connect, which some of the folks on here went to, and I might reminisce a little bit about the time that I was laughed off the stage there. We're going to talk about MDUs briefly, AT&T's fixed wireless program, run through a couple of cities and actually municipal broadband updates for a few places, talk a little bit about what Fort Pierce is doing for low income, talk about whether or not the ACP is going to be renewed. We're going to hit RDOF briefly. We're going to be wrapping through a bunch of stuff. If there's time, Build America waiver. And Doug wrote a really cool post on the increasing demand for upload. So we'll do that. And then we might hit a super geeky technical topic at the end regarding XGS PON. So it's going to be a wild ride today. Let's start off with Travis. I hear that you broke the internet for everyone for weeks at a time. Let me just preface this by saying there's a story in Ars Technica about how CenturyLink left people offline, I think for like 39 days, and only fixed it within a few hours after Ars Technica reached out to them and be like, hey, you ever going to reconnect these people in Portland? Travis, how long was your outage that people freaked out about?
Well, so for the first time in 10 years, we did have a blip. It was three blips, about 10 minutes total at 3:30 in the morning on a Thursday. And the result of it was about an 800 post Reddit thread about the great outage of 2024. So I guess the moral of the story is to all you operators out there, please build a ton of redundancy into your network. And when the battery manufacturer says the batteries only last 10 years, they only last 10 years. So
Travis, you said before, it's always power. That's what I hear from people. If there's a problem with an internet service provider, it's power.
Power, yeah. And then, of course, it was one of those cold days. So when the generator was on, then there was a generator problem to go along with it. So, yes, it is always power.
Woof. All right. The great outage of 2024.
Yeah, we survived it. Yep. 10 minutes. Hopefully another 10 years goes by without another one.
All right. So who here has been at Metro Connect at some point? I was there years ago. Gigi or Doug?
I was there years ago. Yeah.
All right. I was there, and I was invited as a sacrificial lamb. And this is an event with C-suite people from all the big ISPs around the world. They invited me, and I talked about the need for more competition, and they laughed at me, which was okay. I was prepared for that. But Kim and Travis, how was your go around more recently?
I would just like to let you know that this is how I started Metro Connect. I land in Fort Lauderdale. I'm heading to baggage claim, and I get a text from Mr. Travis. Are you in baggage claim right now? This is we ran into each other at the airport when we left. But I think from my perspective,
5 hours to see you.
He was sitting in baggage claim for 5 hours. But what I saw is, first of all, there's never been more blue suits in one space. Maybe in Washington, D.C., GG, that I see more blue suits that I have in the Fort Lauderdale. But I think that was they said there was about 1,700 attendees there this year, which I think is their biggest showing yet. I think there was some you saw a lot of maneuvering. You saw a lot of people looking for money, but you also heard, or at least for me, that some of the networks that have gotten private funding are starting to fail. So it was really just interesting to hear the stories of what is happening in the industry and where this industry really is going. But a lot of interesting conversations. And
more.
Go ahead.
Well, you said some of the networks are starting to fail. Just briefly, I don't want to spend a ton of time on it. But what would you?
No, you're just starting to hear some of these guys who've gotten private funding that there is a lot of there's some, how do I say this, Travis? You were there. There's a lot of strict requirements for some of the private funding that has come out in the past few years. And so some of those networks aren't hitting those benchmarks. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens after the fact. I hate to say this, but I think being at Metro Connect reaffirmed my belief that if we don't get the deployment of this BEAD money right, this is going to end up being just a consolidation of networks into the big telcos. So I think it's more important than ever to make sure we are building and executing on these networks, private and public, around the country. Go ahead, Travis.
Well,
what did you hear?
There was a fair amount of fiber to the spreadsheet. I did notice that, So my number one question was, how many active subscribers do you have? And oh boy, there was a lot of, well, we're planning to have one someday. So that there was a fair amount of that. But most importantly, in this large auditorium, me surrounded by all these other blue suits, Miss Kim McKinley gave me a huge amount of street cred when she just parted the ocean, came right up to me and said hello in front of all the fellows. So kudos to Kim for giving me a whole bunch of broadband credit. So
well, and two, this is the only place that you see Kim McKinley in a dress and Travis Carter in a suit jacket.
Whoa. Yeah. And fancy pants too. I mean, it was a day, so yeah.
Did you take pictures?
we met Senators Klobuchar and Markey, and I'm pretty sure you were wearing what you're wearing now. You got dressed up from.
I wasn't at Metro Connect though. This was No, it was interesting. It was really interesting to see how much. I guess I never had a grasp on how much money is out there in the market looking for a home. And right now the hot item, and I think it has been for the last few years, are these fiber to the home networks. They're getting a lot of attention from the huge equity houses. So it was good. It was very interesting.
All right.
And I got to hang out with Kim, so it was fun.
When I was
there, and to your point, But to your point, Chris, I was on a panel at Metro Connect about open access fiber. So when you say that the competition, like you were laughed off the stage a few years ago, I think the conversation has changed. And to see 5 and 6 people who were talking about open access fiber and had conversations outside of those, it was a huge discussion. So that was really interesting to see that that's where you were a few years ago and what the environment is today.
Yeah.
Can I ask though, Chris, can I ask Kim a question? Because obviously there are a lot of different definitions of open access, right?
Mm-hmm.
AT&T will say that their BlackRock deal is an open access deal. I mean, do you think people are coming around to at least a common understanding of what open access really is and what it means?
Yeah.
No, I think people are pivoting off the word actually open access because it doesn't mean anything anymore because everybody's kind of cannibalized it to whatever they want it to be, right? I think what the AT&T deal and everyone, you're like, is dark. First of all, dark fiber is an open access, in my opinion. And that's what a lot of people have really boiled the definition down to. So I think on my panel, you saw people saying they're like technology, like enable technology infrastructure companies. So I think you're just seeing some people kind of get away from the word open access because what does it mean, Gigi? I mean, I think that's a fair point. What does it mean?
And there's also there's ISPs who are only letting businesses in to get to the business district and claiming their open access, which is, so big deal. You let in AT&T and Lumen to serve a bank and you're open access. So,
yep. When I was there, it was a eye-opening experience for me because I was on a panel with a woman who ran Comcast's business services division and a few other people that were, high up in different positions in the industry. And we had a breakfast, and at it, all of a sudden, it turned to municipal broadband. And the one from Comcast, I think it was, she's like, well, yeah, like, don't they all fail? And I looked at her, and I was like, wait a minute, like, I always assumed that you all were doing that cynically. Like, you knew that it was total crap, although the research that you put out, and that you really actually understood that like these networks are doing well, but you were maligning them. And I looking around that breakfast room, I realized that they really believe the stuff that they're paying shills to publish. It's unbelievable. You never eat your own, excrement, I suppose, but they do, and that was eye opening for me. Then I got on stage, and I knew what audience I was in. So I was like, so how many of you out here feel like you have more of a problem where there's too much competition than a problem of too little competition? And nearly everyone raised their hand and said there was too much. And they started laughing at me. And I was like, I was expecting that. And I just want to let you know that that's fine. Like, I understand your perspective because you see the competition. You're trying to make a business that works. But there's 10,000 mayors who would disagree with you. And they're right also. And so I was trying to make that point. And I don't know if I did or not. But I was glad to be there. It was a good opportunity.
Oh, wait, this show has a new slogan, by the way. So,
what's that?
Don't eat your own excrement.
Yeah, don't eat your own excrement. So let's move on. Oh, one last question was, how much digital equity discussion was there, Kim?
I didn't hear one person talk about digital equity when you have a bunch of bankers and people trying to get ISPs up. I think that's where there is a disconnect of what ISPs want and what like the digital equity people want. And we really have to figure out how to bridge that gap to get this broadband into unserved and underserved America.
And that's very funny because they sure love the billions of dollars that ISPs are getting from the ACP. So I'm kind of surprised. And, the stuff that I get from New Street Research and Moffett-Nathanson are all like obsessed with whether the ACP, this affordable connectivity program for the uninitiated, the $30 or $75 subsidy for low-income households, tribal households, high-cost households. They're certainly obsessed with whether that's going to continue. So I'm a little bit surprised in that regard.
Well, the only two companies that really embraced it are Comcast and Charter. So the rest of the big ISPs really have not paid much.
T-Mobile is actually
T-Mobile,
the second. T-Mobile, Charter is I forgot Charter by far and away, like 3 times more money, like $3 billion. And then the next one's T-Mobile. Then the next company, I just have to say this, is called Excess Telecom. Like, why would you call yourself that?
Hey, Gigi, this is
who got paid tens of thousands of dollars to come up with that idiotic name?
It was crazy.
I come from a telecom named Utopia. Like, we weren't setting ourselves up for failure either. That we make mistakes in the beginning, Gigi. Just, it happens.
That's how I finance my lavish lifestyle, coming up with bad names for companies. So one of the things let's move into ACP in a second, but I do want to say that one of the things that pisses me off when I see uninformed people making accusations against Travis Carter for the USI network and whether or not he's engaged in business practices that are discriminatory based on where he builds is because Travis will text or call me at any hour of the day to pass ideas about how we can actually improve investment in areas like North Minneapolis, in the parts of Minneapolis that are harder to build to. And it is true, like what Kim said, most companies aren't really thinking about this. And so that's why I get on Reddit sometimes when I see pretty ignorant stuff coming out about USI Fiber and weigh in a bit, because I know that we're really trying to make a difference in these areas. Now ACP, I'm curious what Gigi sees happening. My understanding is that Blair Levin has been saying it's still not going to happen, but it's more likely, or it's less likely to not happen than it used to be. I guess like we're in. So you're saying there's a chance territory.
Yeah, I would say that. And the one thing that gives me hope was my experience with the emergency broadband benefit, which was the $50 subsidy that preceded the ACP. So the ACP grew out of the EBB. And I had started working on that, both with industry and public interest groups and the Hill in, early summer, late spring of 2020. And then it just kind of like died and went away. And it came back to life and passed on December 21st, 2020. I will say there's a lot of attention to it. Unfortunately, some of the Republican leadership have kind of, have decided it's no longer a good program, even though it helps so many, in some instances, hundreds of thousands or even more of their constituents. I still think it could come
about
together.
12 million, about 12 million of 12 to 13 million of their constituents.
Well, it's 23 million households, but
it's half and half basically, though. I mean, when we broke down the numbers, it's pretty close. So it's I know what you're saying. Yeah. So it basically, whether you're I hate these terms, but I'll just use them, red state or blue state, you benefit equally. And what's interesting is, there is a bill pending called the Affordable Connectivity Program Extension Act. And we just got Roger Marshall from Kansas on as a co-sponsor. JD Vance is one of the original co-sponsors. So this is not an issue that necessarily, it's actually bipartisan. And there are just a couple of boo birds. Unfortunately, they tend to be some of the more powerful ones, like John Thune, who may well be the next Senate Majority Leader, Ted Cruz, who's the ranking member of the Senate Commerce Committee. So we got to get those guys on board. So I'm cautiously optimistic. The other thing that people should know about is that Senator Ben Ray Lujan from New Mexico is one of the loveliest people in Congress. And Senator Thune and a bunch of folks also from the House have been working on something called the Universal Service Working Group. And they're trying to basically not only save the ACP, but they're also trying to get the FCC to do universal service contribution reform, which is sorely, sorely needed. And I think the outcome of their group, their proposal, I think is going to be coming out very soon. So it'll be interesting. The ACP Extension Act is just a straightforward, we're going to give the ACP another $7 billion, let it live basically for another year. The FCC still has to do universal service contribution reform, but this doesn't address that. The working group is going to be more comprehensive. And I'll just say this, there's some good stuff in there and there's some not great stuff. But, if you can have a bipartisan agreement, everybody's got to take a little bit of their medicine. Yes. Yeah. And that's one of those things that for people that want to achieve that single dominating victory in which we get everything we want and nothing we don't, you're in the wrong industry and sport. I'm not really sure how to answer that. I mean, I think at this point, everyone recognizes that internet access is indeed high quality internet access is indeed an essential utility. I think USF reform would fix a number of problems and that's the important long-term game. We talked about that some last week, where I have to confess that I agree with Shayna with the sort of like, maybe we get ACP renewed, maybe we don't. Like, maybe we have it for another year, maybe we don't. Like, I'm tired of short-term fixes while Congress refuses to think about anything longer term. And at the same time, just hoping that we have a Congress to criticize next year. Who knows? I get pretty worried about things.
Well, what's the general consensus out there of what current ISPs are going to do with their ACP customer base? Is there a common thread?
I don't know if there's a consensus, but I will tell you what I'm hearing or what I expect. I expect, number one, that a number of the states will pick up the slack. You know, I spent a lot of the fall traveling around the country, and I heard from a lot of state broadband officers that they were going to start digital equity funds to try to at least fill some of the gap. Then the other thing is, if I was the chair of the FCC, and I expect the chair of the FCC to do that, to pick up the phone and call every single one of the major ISPs and say, you know, you need to provide a decent $30 free service until we get universal service contribution reform done. And they can afford it. They can certainly afford it. So, you know, it's similar to kind of to what Ajit Pai did when the pandemic hit. He called all the ISPs, the big ISPs, and said, do not cut off anybody because they can no longer afford it. Now, the ISPs agreed for that for about 6 months, and they said, nah, we're done now. So I don't know whether the bully pulpit will work. Now, you know, the gentleman who had a very interesting picture asked, how do we turn broadband into the new copper? I think everybody thinks about that, right? It thinks that way. However, the FCC is moving to classify broadband as a telecommunications service like the telephone. Now, it will not apply all of the provisions that apply to telephone service to broadband, which they should not, but at least broadband will come back under the FCC's regulatory authority. So this is something when I was at the FCC working for Tom Wheeler, we did in 2015. It got repealed just 2 years later by the PI FCC. And now
the whole internet fell apart when you did it. Everything stopped working, Gigi.
It did.
Until
investment ended and blah blah blah. Yeah,
minutes after the ink dried on Pi's signature, the investment flowed back in, and we entered the amazing world of no problems that we currently have. The only reason Travis's network went down is because the FCC is considering net neutrality again, is what I heard.
That's what I heard. Yes.
So, Doug, what are you hearing?
Well, no, a whole lot of small ISPs are telling me that they're going to do it for 3 months out of their own pocket just to see if they get their regulatory act together or legislative act together. So they're not going to do it much longer than that. So they're going to give them a little bit of time. And some of these folks I'm talking to have a lot of customers on it, but they're going to extend it out of their own pocket for a little while. But they're not going to keep going with it. So.
Well, I mean, we'll get some news tonight, right? I mean, Congress has to do something today, or the government starts to shut down, right? No,
no, they extended it. Chris, you're not reading the front page of the Washington Post, my man. So the Congress just passed, and I think the president signed it already. Another short-term continuing resolution, which still has this bifurcated, government funding. So the first tranche, which does not include the FCC and the ACP, is now March 8th, so a week from today. Then the second tranche, which does include the agencies we tend to work with, is March 22nd. So we're pushing it back. We're pushing. Now, I don't know what happens if they continue to push it back. I think it's insane that it's been pushed back. I think it's the third time now, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we need to fund the government, and we need to fund it, for the fiscal year. We're going to be done with the fiscal year by the time, these continuing resolutions end. So we have we have another 21-week extensions we can do. So. Yeah, well, 20. Yeah.
All right.
So anyway, that's where we're at right now. We have a little bit more time.
All right. Well, we will see.
I guess I have a question though. How many states are looking to fund it? Do we know? Is it 1 or is it 50 or?
Well, so
like,
I'd
what do
heard
you
before
think?
that California was going to fund it, and then they found out that it would be $1 billion a year to fund it, and that they had a between $39 and $58 billion deficit. So
Yes.
California is no longer on the list of places that are going to fund it. Now, Illinois, I understand, is looking at a $10 a month kind of program to help, and I think the big cable companies are supportive of that. So I don't know, Gigi, if you've heard other things beyond those. I'm sure you have.
Michigan was the one that I heard, but I haven't heard specifics. I know they were trying to start up a digital equity fund, Maine as well. They both have terrific state broadband officers, I must say. There's a lot of really great ones across the country, and I'm sure that the really, really good ones are looking at, can we do something? Because Lifeline is still available, right? And it's only $9.25. But maybe you cobble together, if a state could do $20 or $10, you can cobble together $20. It's not ideal. Just so folks know, there has been filed at the FCC an emergency petition for the FCC to expand the amount of money that Lifeline provides, given the demise of the ACP. So this was filed by Connexon, which is, builds in a lot of rural areas, run by a former FCC colleague of mine, Jonathan Chambers. And they filed this petition, I guess, about a week ago, asking the FCC, see what kind of pennies you can dig out of your pocket and increase Lifeline. And look, Doug, I read with not only interest, but a big smile on my face, your critique of both the USDA spending reconnect money and the FCC doing enhanced ACAM, right? Was it $100 million a year for 10 years in the middle of the BEAD program?
That's coordination.
Hold on. ACAM to BEAD to what? I got to keep all these
They're different programs. So
I got to keep all these government acronyms. I'm making a list of them.
ACAM doesn't apply to you, Travis. That's for like the small historic ILECs, the telephone companies, usually the small family-owned ones or co-ops.
But the larger point, Chris, is that the FCC distributes money when it feels like it, even though it might interfere with $42.5 billion that's come from Congress. So that's why I think folks are hoping that they will take this emergency petition seriously, and again, dig into get the pennies out of their pockets in order to help poor people. Another thing the FCC is looking at doing is funding cybersecurity software for schools and libraries. I'm not going to say that's not important, but when you're not doing contribution reform, then and you've got all these competing pots of competing interests, I do actually think that the poor folk ought to come first. But that's just me. Well, I'm just silly.
I'm not going to go back into my rant about this FCC and its commitment to those folks. But last week or 2 weeks ago in the episode of Connect This, I did go in depth and I was very honest about it. So I do want to move on. So talking about the FCC and how it spends its money, we just some interesting article about AT&T and fixed wireless, where Verizon and T-Mobile have spent a bunch on fixed wireless and acquiring customers, and AT&T had not done as much, which fascinated me because the Connect America Fund 2 from like 2016 to 2021 or so dumped billions of dollars on AT&T to improve service to at least 10 megabits down, 1 megabit up, which was a horrendous goal. But nonetheless, AT&T didn't meet it. Still got to keep all the money. They got $300 million in Mississippi alone. The Public Service Commission, led by Brandon Presley, had tried to investigate it because basically AT&T said it spent $300 million and nobody got better internet access. Right. My understanding is that AT&T said, we recognize that copper can't do the job, so we're going to do wireless in all of these states in the South and Kentucky and whatnot. And now we find out that AT&T ended 2023 with 93,000 Internet Air subscribers, which is their wireless home product, which means that they got billions of dollars to connect nobody. And it's infuriating to me that we're going to see, how many times my friend Spaggy, who runs Hoopa Valley's Acorn Wireless, they have like 100 subs on their ACP. I think he said they've been audited 6 times. from the FCC. How many times has AT&T been audited for the billions of dollars here? So, Doug, did I miss anything? Am I confusing products, or is that what's happening out there?
It's worse than what you think, because they got most of the 93,000 in the last year. So all those years when they were because what AT&T has been saying for years is, we're going to drop your DSL and we're going to offer fixed wireless for you. They never actually did. Now they are. Now they are where they have a cell site. And so, I mean, they're doing it very actively. I've actually know lots of folks who got that offer, but I just wrote a blog about a month ago about this poor lady in California who she can't be reached by cell sites. So they just cut her copper dead. They literally came out and snipped it at her house, so I've actually, heard them make the offer in the AT&T store. So they're doing it. And they only have 93,000, but now they say they're doing 2,000 a week, and they're going to crank that up to 5,000 to 6,000 a week. So they're finally out marketing it, but they're not marketing it to the DSL replacers now. They're marketing it the same way T-Mobile and Verizon is. It's a moneymaker. So they are stepping it up, and they say they're going to grow to 150,000 additional customers minimum for the rest of this year, and maybe a lot more. We'll see. So.
I have a really serious question, Doug. Do you just troll the AT&T store to see what they're saying? Since you're just listening.
No, I bought a phone that I had to go back 3 times for, so you get to hear lots of good stuff in the AT&T store.
Okay, just asking. Moving on.
I just happened to be there when they told this poor lady they were cutting her copper dead. So
well, we almost got a Mitchell rant. It was this. God, it was close.
It was close.
All right, hold on.
And nobody provoked him. He provoked himself, which is even more interesting.
But he's absolutely right. The ACAM money,
no CAF 2,
CAF 2 for the big carriers is mostly all pocketed.
At least the ACAM money had like no restrictions, but most of the carriers are still building fiber. Like they had to build 25x3, and they're building out fiber networks to do it because they actually care about the communities.
Well, some of the smaller of the big companies like Windstream actually tried to improve their DSL. So you do see some of them who did it. Most of them did nothing. I mean, CenturyLink pocketed most of it. Frontier pocketed most of it. So, yeah.
All right. So, Travis, did you want to poke me, or should we move on to Ardoff and throw and lob some things at Gigi? Because I'm curious about some Ardoff.
I think you're simmering just nicely right now. So we'll keep it going, huh?
So Ardoff, there's an issue that came back up in the news, which is again a call for an amnesty about where providers bid on these areas, and now it's not working out the way they thought it would be. The costs are higher, and so the question of whether it would make sense to allow them to default at no cost to free up these areas so that BEAD can invest in them. And the reason I want to just talk about it is I wanted to see, first of all, what Gigi has any reflections on Ardoff. But for me, I supported the idea of the reverse auction. I still think it was an elegant approach if you have honest actors and it's competently designed. But what we ended up with is such a disaster. And I am so bitter about a bunch of companies coming in, bidding too low, which then killed the business models of mostly co-ops and others that would have done a good job, drove them out of the market. And now the companies that won the bids don't want to build. And it's just infuriating.
Okay, Chris. I mean, for real, like, did you put all those caveats of if this happened, if this happened, if this happened? Like, it's like you are living in this like Pollyanna world. I mean, I get that it's an elegant solution if all of those things happen, but telecom has never been that way. So, I mean, it's like, I think that, I want to
hear how Gigi reacts. Yeah, I want to hear how Gigi reacts because the question is, like, is this just too elegant of a policy that doesn't work in the real world?
Well, clearly it is not. Although I will say some of my former colleagues, particularly Carol Maddie, who you should have on your show, might beg to differ. She actually sees the good in the Ardoff, though most people don't. Let me just explain first. There's different flavors of so-called amnesty that people are asking for, right? So there's a lawyer I worked very closely with on getting NTIA to fix the letter of credit issue. Named Phil Macris, and he represents a bunch of Ardoff. I don't call them, he calls them winners. I'm sorry. I call them awardees because I refuse to call them winners because they're not building the networks. And he's actually asking for more money saying, well, costs have gone up and it took the FCC a long time to give the authorizations. And, only if you won't give us more money, give us complete amnesty. Now, I helped to draft and AEPB signed onto a letter that did not ask for complete amnesty. And I really want to wring the neck of the PC Magazine reporter who wrote that. That's what the letter said. Like, read the damn letter. The letter said a limited, very limited, like 3-4 weeks period of time for amnesty where you don't get the full power of every single penalty. So it's, in other words, limited penalties, but not a free pass. It does the letter, which is only 2 pages long, does not ask for a free pass. So please read it, people. And I've had some people complain, say, well, I have a client who's an RDOF winner and he's really pissed off at your letter because you just want to, give a free pass to these people with no consequences. Like, no, that's not what it says, number one. And number two, there are, at least I know for a fact in Mississippi, there's like 25,000 census blocks that are subject to RDOF awards where the ISP is not going to build. So who gets screwed? So what the letter says is, look, FCC, you have the power to grant this limited amnesty period, again, with less penalties than you might otherwise impose. If after that time passes, people default, you can even impose more penalties if you wanted to, but give these areas a chance to get BEAD funding. Otherwise, the most disconnected communities will continue to be disconnected. And again, I've heard people complain about, again, equity, and it's just like, I get it. I get that. But do you want these areas to be served?
Right.
Or
so
do you want
Gigi,
them to be completely screwed?
I think I
Yeah,
found
but
the correct press release. Put it in the chat. At the bottom of that, people can read the full letter. Go ahead, Doug.
But the problem is, if you throw 25,000 census blocks into BEAD at the last minute, there's not enough money to go around. So
there's already not enough money to go around, Doug.
I know. So I mean, the problem is, this is a little too late. This should have been resolved last fall.
So, if only we had an FCC that cared about getting its work done in a timely fashion when it really mattered.
Yes.
Look, but at least you're right, Doug. However,
it's better than nothing.
At least those census blocks will have an opportunity to get BEAD money. Now they're not even on the map, right? They're just like, they don't exist.
Right. And this is a real deal. Like, I mean, I was just looking at, I'm working, with Connect Humanity, we're working with some folks in Appalachia, and indeed, there's RDOF areas nearby that have not started to be built out, and will not be eligible for any funds. I think it would be better to have those areas eligible to see if something could start being built, because frankly, there's other areas that aren't eligible anyway that are adjacent, and we need to get something into one area so that we can hopefully expand it into another area in a timely fashion. So, but Gigi, can you answer the other question? And I don't want to spend too much time on it, but to what extent do you think RDOF could have been done well with better rules and better upfront qualifications to bid?
Absolutely. So it's funny, the last public speech I gave before I got nominated, I criticized the federal government for how it, over 10 years, is spending like $70 billion, not just the RDOF, but just all the funding over, from 2010 to 2020, of not doing the due diligence up front to make sure that the people they were giving the money to were actually qualified to do what they promised. In number one. Number two, not doing any kind of oversight to see whether those networks would get built, see CenturyLink and Frontier. And number three, not imposing any consequences when they didn't. So CenturyLink and Frontier kept defaulting, and then they were allowed to participate in the next process. So, that's the problem is yes, it's not just the rules, it's the enforcement, it's the oversight needs to be a lot tighter. And I know people complain, and the NTIA is asking too much, and, too many requirements and too complicated. I hope they take that spirit and apply that to oversight and apply that to enforcement. Now, the leadership that's there now is probably not going to be there during those time periods. But as important as it is to find people that actually can do what they're promising, it's important to see they actually do the thing, right? That they keep their promises.
Yeah,
And
I
they
guess
don't, and if they
They're-
don't, that they don't get to participate again.
They're going to
Kim?
tell you they don't have enough budget to do the oversight. I guarantee it.
They will say
Well,
that. Kim?
I think my question is that it's what, like exactly what you just mentioned, Gigi. It's that there's too many rules, which I get why B did what they did because they were trying to protect the money, or the NTIA did what they are. But then that really eliminates those smaller players from even trying to attempt because of all that. So how do we really mitigate of that? We want to protect the money, but not make it too difficult for like smaller entrants to participate, because I think that's the crux of the problem at the end of the day.
Well, there's actually a very easy answer to that because almost all the states have had state grant programs, and they've all gone very well. They get to know the ISPs in their state, and they've not given money out to bad players in the state grants.
Mm-hmm.
And if they would have just
Perhaps
given
a little
money,
overstated, but generally I agree,
well,
David.
but if they would have given the money
So,
to the
Doug.
states 2 years ago, it would already be being built, and most of the people who got it would be quality people. Not all. There's always problems. So all the shenanigans that happen in the program.
Doug, your mic, I don't know what happened, but you're starting to be garbled.
Not much I can do about it. Okay.
All right, now you're coming through again now, of course.
Okay.
But I think we got your point.
Yes.
I want to ask a different question, which is one that Travis has raised multiple times in the past, moving to a new subject area, which is how do we build networks in low-income areas where there are difficult challenges? The Community Broadband Bits podcast this week featured Fort Pierce Utility Authority, municipal network in Florida that has started building in the lowest income areas and been able to do that because of matching funds from philanthropy that have recognized the need to improve service, that they provide free service in parks and an affordable service for low-income households in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. And so, Travis, you've listened to it. I was just curious, if that obviously it's an easy question if half of the costs are paid for by someone else. But anything else you took away from it?
Well, I mean, they're an electric co-op, so they already have revenue. I mean, I think that's where a lot of these new entrants into our space, and it became painfully clear down at Metro Connect, is if you don't have revenue, that's real hard to get capital from banks, investors, even angel investors. And honestly, with the 5% bump in interest rates last year, it's killing all the small players.
Well, Travis, let me so you can. This isn't necessarily me refuting you, but I want you to respond to this. They have revenue. They have an electric plant that generates a ton of revenue and it has a ton of value, but they cannot use any of the benefits of any of the revenue from that to cross subsidize, right? We can't generally, whether it's state law or various other good policies, you can't take money from a regulated area and then subsidize costs in a competitive area. And so the revenues they have in electricity are more or less irrelevant. But tell me why it is relevant from a banking perspective.
Well, I mean, are they able to backstop the debt with it or not?
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
they are. Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about.
There you go. It'd be no different than you putting your house up as a personal guarantee. There's a backstop to the debt. And a lot of operators, especially the really small operators and in these rural areas, I mean, they don't have anything to backstop any significant debt. Even trying to get a letter of credit, I mean, that's an act of Congress for a lot of these small players, which goes back to my whole theory that 98% of this BEAD money is going to go to the incumbents anyways. And that's why Kim, did you hear many people talking about BEAD?
Not at all. I think everybody thinks it's,
yeah. Anybody who's building networks talking about BEAD.
I think that's because it's just such a variable that people think right now, because you hear this speculation from a lot of these investors and ISPs is it going to come out this year? Is there going to be political pressure with an election that is going to come out faster? Or are we going to see it in 2025? And I think I don't think that there's enough certainty with people of when that money is going to be coming out, that people are just going other routes. And I think that's why I agree with you, Travis. A lot of the money is going to go to the incumbents, because you can't just wait around for your business plan for this money to maybe come in. And I get why, but it sucks on both fronts.
Yeah, the only people I've heard talk about BEAD are the vendors that ramped up their production facilities, who are now begging us to buy things. because they really ramped everything up, assuming that cash was going to come out in 24. So right now, if you can build fiber, there's no better time to get bits, parts, and pieces than right now at a discount. So I would leverage whatever you can, put as much in this year as you can, because when this money hits, then they're all going to chase that.
I'd like to get back to your Fort Pierce, though. They're not the only one that did it, because, for example, Grant PUD and Washington did something very interesting. They took the demographics of all the areas and they did the richest and the poorest first, the second richest and the second poorest second. So they did, the folks who were right in the middle were last. So, it's a very interesting way to do it. But again, they're an electric company, so that that makes all the difference in the world. So, yeah.
But Gigi said something that I think we don't talk about enough. Like, what we're doing with our ACP people is we're just going to honor the price without getting the ACP benefit back, and we're just going to do that forever, because the business model is strong enough that you can support a certain percentage of customers that aren't paying full rack rate. So I don't believe a lot of these people, especially if they've got like 50,000 subscribers or more, there's margin in there. You can onboard 1,000 or 2,000 people at 50%, and you still make enough money to cover the cost.
You know that you've just pissed off a lot of ISPs, Travis, who are now going to be like,
no. Now, if you've got 100 users or you've got 200 customers, there isn't.
There's something like, I don't know, 2,400, 3,000 ISPs in the United States of America. Like, I don't know. There's a few that have millions of subscribers. There's a few that have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. The number that have 50,000 subscribers or above, Doug, what do you think it is? Like 100, 150 of them? Like the vast majority of ISPs are much
vast majorities have 2,000 to 5,000 customers. The vast majority, yes.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Doug, and this is the part that I've talked to some of the smaller ISPs about. Is it better to get $1 or $0?
It's a tough call.
You already have the hardware cost. I mean, our theory is we're just going to let, if they're paying $30 a month and, whatever it was, ACP was paying 30, we're going to be happy to keep the 30 indefinitely.
Because they're already installed, but you're not going to install any new people under that deal. No.
I think we're going to run with it. I think we're going to do it.
Really?
Yeah.
So one thing.
You're a really good guy.
Well, no,
all right. I want to hear what Gigi has to say before she leaves.
One thing that we've been hearing that seems to resonate with Republicans, a couple things. One is that if you take away this subsidy, that's less money that goes into the local economy. So that's something that actually resonates. The other
millions of dollars in a rural county.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing they want to know, and I've actually asked Elliot Noss at Ting to see if he would give me some numbers, is what would it cost an ISP to basically wind down an ACP customer and wind them back up again, to the extent that the subsidy comes back either because of Congress or because of the FCC. And by the way, you're going to lose a lot of people because the trust is going to be gone. Right, you took this away from me once. What's to say you're not going to take away from me again? And I'm going to jump through all these hoops. That's ACP is pretty damn bureaucratic in its own right. If you're just going to take away from me again. So again, but the question is, what does it actually cost an ISP to wind down an ACP recipient and possibly bring them back in the future? I don't know the answer to that question, but if there's any ISPs, Travis, that might want to share that. That seems to also be resonating with some of the skeptics.
No, I think you're 100% correct. The reason we're going to keep it is it's not these people's fault that the ACP went away. And at the end of the day, we're going to look bad because of it. We gave them and took it back. So if there's a program that replaces ACP down the road someday, so be it. But we're just going to assume there isn't, and we're going to honor our commitment to these folks. And and even look at adding new folks, because I don't want to lose. I don't want to have that reputation in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And
no, I
had dinner with Elliot the other night. I would assume they're probably thinking the same thing.
Yeah. There's no technical cost, Gigi, because it's easy to turn fiber on and off, but there is the paperwork of getting them through the bureaucracy. I mean, that's
there is some cost depending on your reliance on it. There's different factors that come in here for a predominantly urban large ISP like Travis, which Travis, I would call you large, comparatively. I mean, sitting at more than 50,000 subs, as I would say, I would assume that you are larger than 90% of other ISPs, although you're tiny compared to the biggest 10.
But I have a question. So Travis, so the money you're getting right now, is that going directly to you from ACP and they're not having to pay a bill?
No, so we basically, what was ACP, $30? So the customer's paying 30 and then ACP was paying 30 in our world.
Okay, so you're just reducing it halfway. Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I think the ones that are going to have really a tough time is where they were charging 30 and getting 30 from the ACP. Boy, that would be a real difficult situation, especially if you added debt attached to that 30 to build the network. Now,
right. That's what I wanted to get into, because two examples I would throw out there. One, CTC in Minnesota here, Christy Westbrock, who is brilliant. I think they do a lot of good work. They're serving Boys Fort, tribal nation, and they built out and they can make it work at $75 a month on the tribal nation. That goes away. A lot of people living on the reservation cannot pay it. CTC cannot cover that. That's one example. Another example is Mohawk Networks, where they have like 600 subscribers. Like it's like 10 to 20% of their subscriber base. That's $600,000 a year, I believe, roughly, of lost costs. That's multiple positions at that point. And so I'm not saying that because I disagree with Travis. I just want people who are listening to understand that this hits different ISPs in different ways. And for some of them, this is very difficult. And CTC may be expanding less over the next few years to rural areas because they're losing all of this revenue that had been coming in through the ACP. And so that's what really upsets me about the number of Republicans representing rural areas who are opposing this just to deny Joe Biden a victory. Like it's very political to deny this. It is extremely harmful to the rural ISPs that have made commitments to build out.
Well, and it's also, again, along the same vein, it hurts the BEAD program, right? To the extent an ISP might consider serving a very rural area because of that ACP revenue, they may now not do that, right? The ACP is actually is an incentive to build in some of those most rural places. And if that goes away, then, you may land up with a lot of places that may have been served, but won't be served.
Exactly.
Now that brings up something very interesting that I heard this week. 4 different ISPs who are thinking of BEAD told me their state broadband office wants them to cover the BEAD subsidy out of their own pocket if they apply for BEAD.
The ACP subsidy, you mean? I think you misspoke.
Yes, the ACP subsidy. And that's 4 different states. I have to think that that's coming from NTIA. Make them do it anyway, is what I think that means.
98%, Travis. You're pulling me toward you.
Well, okay. So now, do you guys really want to get Chris wound up?
Oh, here we go. Let's go.
All right, here you go. So this ACP conversation, as difficult as it is a rounding error compared to the interest rate adjustment last year. So if anyone has any political pull, if they could reset it a couple points, everyone could cover the ACP cost without a problem. So there you go.
Oh, so we're going to turn this into a macroeconomics show, Travis?
Well, no, remember, I only went to college 9 days, so I don't know.
I just so everyone knows, I went to get a master's in public policy. You got to take some macroeconomics, but I lost my ankles. I have been in chronic pain for the past 20 years, and I had surgery when I was taking macroeconomics, and I had to take Percocet, and the Percocet always hit me right in macro, so I am very weak.
How the hell do we always get into macroeconomics on this podcast every single time? I haven't figured that out.
We didn't. We got into Percocet. What are you talking about?
Oh, okay. Sorry, Doug.
All right, Chris, I'll go one step further. If they reduce 500 basis points back to where it was, I'll give all the ACP customers for free. Internet for life. There you go.
Don't say that.
Travis, I'm with you. I desperately want them to lower it just to make sure that the economy is humming along for the rest of this year.
Well, so ask your CTC person how much their debt structure is and how big of an impact that was.
No, everyone I've talked to is the same thing they say the same thing that you say.
All right, perfect. You're not even wound up. I was saving that little arrow. You didn't even bite.
Gigi, when are you taking off? People see her disappear. We know that we don't have you for that much longer.
Well, no, I've got to leave in about 2 minutes. I just have a 4:00 call, a 4:00 Eastern call. But this has been great fun. And again, if the offer still stands, sorry, Kim, I still want to do it. It's a great way. I try to chill out on Fridays if I can, or at least use it to catch up on work. It doesn't always work that way. But this is a great way to kind of slide into the weekend. I'm enjoying this enormously.
This is chill. Yeah.
It's chill and look, we can all gripe together but hopefully also we can also celebrate together. Like Utopia is killing it, people.
Yes.
Utopia is just killing it.
Well, and Gigi, we have this law in Minnesota that the governor's put forth a bill and it's moving through. There's gonna be but we might see the barrier reduced in Minnesota.
That would be fantastic. And, we have, by the way, I'm going to make an announcement right now that AEPB is coming out with its public broadband, basically how to build a public broadband network handbook on Wednesday, the 6th, right before the State of the Union. I'm sure it'll take attention away from that. And let's hope that the president mentions the ACP in the State of the Union. I've been kind of nudging my buddies in the White House to see if we can make that happen.
That would be good.
It is 22 million Americans. We should talk about ACP, but we shall see what happens.
3 million households.
23.
Sorry.
Households.
If there's popular demand, Travis and I will do a live stream during the State of the Union, and Travis can just make me rant over and over and over again.
Oh, that'd be good. And I think
I would tune in for that.
Yeah.
I would tune in for that. Yeah.
Let's all get in. Okay, get it on the calendar.
All right, guys, I am going to have to bolt. I love you all. And
Thank you.
the audience.
Bye, Gigi.
I saw some of the comments, and I'm very flattered by folks' compliments. And, look, I'm not on the inside, but I'm going to make trouble on the outside. I already have. So I'm going to continue to do that. Good trouble.
Excellent. Thank you.
Bye, Gigi.
Bye-bye.
Let's talk about the Build America waiver. Anyone have any thoughts? We've talked about it over and over again in the past, and looks like it's finalized. It looks like it's reasonable, I guess. I don't know.
It's reasonable. And what happened, it's really unfortunate why we have it. We have it because it took them 2 years to get to here, which gave factories time enough to ramp up. I mean, 2 years ago, most of this stuff was not made here.
And by this stuff, you mean like the gear,
cabling? Yeah, we always made the fiber here, but we didn't make much of the other stuff here. So by now we make almost everything. And so what this waiver does, it's still going to have an exclusion for the chips because we're not making those chips yet. We will make those chips here in a couple of years, but not
the
now.
fabs are being built.
They're being built, but they're not going to make it in time for BEAD. And there's some exemption for other fiber manufacturing stuff that's in there. But other than that, this covers everything else. And the way they did it for the chips is they're going to lower the threshold where your electronics have to be 55% American made. I'll let that go lower because chips are the expensive part. So that'll drop it a little bit. So basically they're saying everything but chips has to be American. And NTIA is estimating that's going to be 90% of all the stuff is American made. And that's awesome because that creates a ton of jobs. I love Build America. I think it's great. So
Kim?
I love Build America, but if we go back to the fundamentals of this waiver and why it was in place, it was a little bit because of the smaller guys and letting them not have because they don't have those relationships, right? And so do we care about the BABA waiver when you think if Travis is correct that 98% of this is going to big telco? I guess is my question.
I care I care because it's still American factories doing with stuff, so I care. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things.
Macroeconomics,
Hashtag macroeconomics by Chris.
If the if the money is mostly going to the bigger guys, then I prefer even more that it be made in America because we're going to get so few benefits from the big companies building these networks. We should have the trickle-down benefits of creating some good jobs.
Wait a minute. Chris said he's in favor of trickle down. I've lost all sense of reality.
Soon we will be talking freakonomics on this. I can't wait.
I've got opinions. Travis, you were going to say something?
No, you've been traveling a lot. You're not in your right state of mind right now. Yeah, altitude sickness, right?
This is one of those things that we thought would be a big problem, and turns out not to have been, in part because of time. And this is, I'll tell other people, like, one of the things that I always look at when I see people freaking out over something is I wonder if they are underestimating the power of time. Whenever I hear people say, like, oh, we're never going to have fiber here, I'm always like, shut up. Like 200 years ago, like, just look at what happens in 200 years, like where we've gone. Like, who knows what's going to happen in the next 10 or 15 years?
Okay, Chris, Pollyanna over there. Like, come on. Like, that time didn't do this. At the end of the day, there was a lot of lobbying and there was a lot of efforts to get this waiver in place. It wasn't just because of time got us here. I know that the Fiber Broadband Association and other associations have been working their tails off to really make this happen. So it's not that we just sit back and time is going to solve all. It's that it took a lot of efforts to get there.
My point is not that it's going to magically happen. Doug started off his point making the point, right? If this Buy America waiver had to be done in 6 months, Nokia, for instance, would not have had time to figure out what assembly lines to buy, how to refit them, how to make the stuff they're going to, whatever they had to go through, right? These different companies had to figure out how to make these plans and shift their supply chains. And that's what 2 years allows you to do. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, that's true, but I mean, then they go down to Travis's point. A lot of them rushed to get to this point and now have excess because they rushed because they thought the money would be out by now.
So we're living in the best of all possible worlds. I don't know if you knew that or not. I think every day I wake up and I think that every day.
That's the first thing you wake up and think. You think the first thing you wake up and think is, let me think about the Babel waiver.
I'm getting pushed out of my bed by our new dog. I think this is the best of all possible worlds.
You know, Chris Mitchell, you live a sexy life. I cannot deny you that.
And we're also in an industry where the vendors jump the gun every single time. They totally overestimate every new thing that comes along. This has been going on for 25 years. So, I mean, they just get over exuberant and they go too fast and they always have a big problem then. So that's just their boom and bust cycle. So.
Right. Okay. So 2 more things I want to cover. One is, Doug, upload demand keeps going up. It's a big deal. Apparently you have other friends who are struggling with upload in their cable homes. It's a good post. We'll put it in the chat here.
Yeah, well, first off, the average home is now using 40 gigabytes a month of upload. That's a pretty impressive number. Most people are shocked by that. I have my own router measures all that stuff. I'm shocked by how much. We only have 2 people. We use a ton of it. So there's a whole lot of upload things going.
I uploaded 5 terabytes over the past week and a half.
But you don't count because you're producing content. But there are people like you. The point is that's how we get the average up there. People thought nobody uploaded, and it turns out ever since the pandemic, everybody uploads because everything's gone to the cloud. You don't have any software you normally use that's not in the cloud. None. And so
if you want to see a good episode of Broadband Breakfast, watch Kim McKinley's episode where Drew asked Kim about upload, and look at her facial expression. Like we're having this conversation in 2024 about upload.
But the point is, people on cable networks are still struggling. 15 to 20 megabits is not enough for houses. And that's not the volume of upload, it's the speed. That's still a big limitation for a whole lot of houses. The house that I mentioned in the article was 2 people that work at home and 2 kids who are post 18 and still live at home and are gamers. Man, they have to take turns still using the internet. They're not an unusual household. So
how old are these 2 kids who live at home? Are they 26? Are they 40? Who are gamers? Because we got some problem there too.
Oh, like 1920. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my wireless bill has exploded since I adopted Pokemon Go as my the thing that I do all the time.
Okay, you know that Pokemon Go was probably like 10 years ago or something, Chris. You're a little behind the times. But to Travis's point
Travis
on that,
doesn't use much for his pinball machine. So
I think my point was that Travis was trying to make on the podcast with Drew. I think I was so surprised by that question. All I just did. Are you really asking that upload question on a streaming podcast right now? Let's really have that question. It's because I think, does the average consumer even know what upload is? They know if it works. And I think that's
They
more
know
the
the
conversation.
problem. They know they have a
Mhm.
problem. They may not understand the specifics. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
I find it, I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense. Also, just backup. I mean, I've said this before. I still feel like the killer app, if we're going to have that conversation again for upload, is backup. Whether it is the threat of ransomware, whether it is convenience, or just whatever, it is sure nice. And these backup plans are affordable, and they just run in the background and work. It's pretty nice.
Yes. So anyhow, it's still a major issue. It's not going away. Cable companies are still freaking out over it.
And thank you, Ruben, for the comment. Pokemon went. It's not Pokemon Go. It's Pokemon went. I love that. Thank you, Ruben.
There's still stuff happening, I assure you. People reach out if you want to be friends. Okay. The other one.
Yeah, this podcast really changed about 6 minutes ago. Did something happen? Yeah.
It's about to change again.
The adult left the room.
The adult left the kids in the room.
So XGS PON. Curious about a passive optical network. We're talking about a network where you got one fiber coming out of the optical line terminal, which is in a hut somewhere, likely in the city. That fiber gets broken out to between, let's say, 32 to 128 subscribers who ultimately share that one. And I had a question from an engineer whether, as all of those people using it, let's assume 128 subs are using it, do they start to experience latency issues? Obviously, like if they're all trying to do speed tests at the same time, they're going to have an issue with bandwidth. But do they also start to have a latency issue the way the technology works?
Well, a couple things. First off, if you're talking residential, 128 users are not going to put a big strain on the 10 gigabit path. They're just not, even bandwidth wise, they are not going to put a strain on it. That's a lot of bandwidth. And they're mostly, at any given time, half of them aren't on. So
right, half of them aren't even home.
So that's not a real issue. Now, in a business district, it could be a real problem. Businesses really use a lot of bandwidth, some of them. And so, I would never put 128 businesses. I would assume it's not, you got to remember, fiber latency is so low that even if it got a little bit worse, it's still better than anything else by far. So if it went from 10 to 12, so what, right? So it's not going to go bad. It can't. The real problem with putting 128 people on is the risk of losing 128 people with a card failure. I mean, that's a much bigger risk. So that's why most of my clients are not going with 128. So
right, because sorry, Kim, 1 second. I just want to make sure people know, like, this is one of those things where there's different places where something can go wrong in a fiber optic network. Fiber optic networks have fewer places for things to go wrong than a cable network, for instance, just the way they're built. But in a passive optical network, if you have a port that goes out, if that happens on Travis's network, it happens to one customer the way he's engineered it, because it's one fiber, one customer. But on a PON, a flaky port takes down however many customers they're sharing that fiber. And if that's 128, you got 128 people. That's enough people to have a good thread going on Reddit pretty quick.
Right off the bat, immediately a bad thread for Travis. Yes.
So Kim, what's your question?
Okay, this is a very serious question, like I frequently have here on Connect This. So Chris, you wake up and think about the Babel waiver. Do you go to sleep thinking about the XGS PON? Well, like, does your whole day bookend with these two really incredibly enthralling?
I try to visualize the frame and how it works.
I'm just asking, just for your listeners out there.
And Ruben's asking if the latency's higher on PON than active Ethernet.
Yeah. So Travis, let's throw this to Travis. What's your thought on this issue?
So latency, I'm not sure you could distinguish it. I suppose if you really got deep down into the PHY, you could probably determine that active EU is maybe a little bit more efficient than an optical network. I think it goes back to the outage conversation. You've really got to do your risk mitigation of when there's a problem, how many users does it affect? So in an active Ethernet network, the problem you have is you've got much larger cables full of fiber that you're pulling into a neighborhood. So your risk of being dug up is could impact a whole bunch of people versus an electronics failure in an optical network. And if you have to do maintenance, you're going to take down 32 homes, which then has it's how you want to handle your customer service. When we chose Active-E back in the early days, PON I thought was an inefficient technology. XGS PON is a game changer for this at this point. 18 milliseconds to what, Ruben? Because that's really high.
18 milliseconds on a fiber network, that's not good. That's not that's not a well-configured network unless it's all at your house.
Is that to your first hop, or because that should almost be 0?
Now you may have a really inefficient Wi-Fi router. So
that's to an off-net speed test.
Okay, off-net speed test. Yeah. So what you really want to do is if your ISP offers a local speed test, that's your best true test. Because where is the
right. And answering that question, the question is always, what are you measuring? Because if you want to measure how your network is in your neighborhood, then you want to go to your ISP speed test. If you want to get a sense of how you're really going to perform in the world, then you want to go to an off-net speed test. Because if your ISP is running very congested lines to the world, then it doesn't matter how great the internal network is, you're going to get stuck in that queue to get out to the world.
But
not to mention,
you made a statement earlier, though. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
A lot of the big ISPs are accused of doctoring their speed tests.
Yeah. Well, they do because a lot of the PON networks, hardware, they'll have a prioritization for speed test.
Right.
So that they will prioritize speed test.
I don't think that ever happens. I've seen a speed test on that. It got exactly 1 gig upload and download. I was like, this has to be accurate because that always happens.
With 1000.00, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect.
It is perfect. There is nothing happening that is that shady right there at all.
But the reality, and I guess I'd like Kim's opinion on this as being an operator, 95% of people just want it to work.
Yeah.
It's kind of like asking, what's your PSI on your water coming into your house? I don't know. I just turn it on. Uptime is far more important than speed tests.
Yeah, like you're gonna have I think you're gonna have a small majority that really care about that speed test and they want to see those numbers, right? Very small, but most people just want it to work. Most people don't know what gig means. Most people don't know what meg means. Like they just want it to work. So I think that's where you've almost starting to see people pay for higher speeds because they don't understand the technology and they just think if there's a bigger number behind it or it costs more, that it's going to be more. So I think that is what you're really seeing on the uptake of some of these higher speed levels as well.
Well, and back to the original question, there's no practical difference between 10, 11, 12, and 13 milliseconds. They're all wonderful. There's no practical difference between them.
Which you get that on your network, right, Doug? That's exactly what you see on your network.
Yeah, Charter's awesome. Yeah.
I can't believe I'm going to say this. Chris brings up actually a pretty good point. Sometime we should do a peering DB conversation where you can look at your ISP and see how they're interconnected to other ISPs. There's a fiber.
That has a lot to do with
there's a fiber provider that I ran into that had one internet transit connection for all their subscribers. I mean, that's terribly
and it got terribly congested. Yes.
Exactly.
So, yes.
I'm just looking. When are we gonna go? There it is. June 13, 14, Kansas City Peering Summit. Any of the listeners of this show want to come on out? I've been invited to go down and to take part. I'd really like to. To me, that looks like a kind of event I could learn a lot at. But maybe we could do a show there, or even just do a little video there that we then reflect on, Travis. But we could pick up some content there, I think.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's really. It's important that the ISP's backend is architected correctly to get to bet. I mean, you can put all the fiber you want in the world, but if you have terrible interconnects, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Yep. Well, those are the big topics. Any last words before we head out?
Percocets.
More micro in a Toronto radio. Toronto moved in the 6 gigahertz spectrum.
I would just like to say hashtag macroeconomics is what I want to talk about. Okay, thank you.
Macro is very hard on Percocet. I am. It's a lot easier to get through the class though. I think we're going to be looking at doing this again in 2 weeks on a Friday the 15th, because I'm at the Travel Broadband Bootcamp for like a solid week before that. So
well, hold on now. Shout out to AFL for getting you some cable. So
yes, no, thank you so much, AFL. And then Calix has really gone above and beyond in terms of helping us to be able to light the fiber and do some cool stuff to show off what one can do with a network, showing how the PON works and that sort of a thing. So I went to their office today in Plymouth and got a little bit of training in it, so that when I turn it on in 1 week in Southern California, that I'll be able to know what command lines to run and some rough things to do to bring it up. So if in 2 weeks I'm totally frazzled.
Can you please have someone film you turning it up? We want to see it.
Yeah. And Chris, don't call. I don't know the commands on a Calix network, so don't.
Well, and that's the other thing. Like the people I was talking to are like, because I was just like, we timed this really well, because I'm gonna be, we're gonna get there, and we're gonna be. So we have 48 count fiber that Matt has already trenched conduit in. We're gonna be pulling fiber through, and then Merritt is sending out people who are gonna help us get all the fiber spliced and arranged correctly. And right about the time that everyone at Calix is getting a nice weekend started, I'm going to be trying to figure out how to turn on this network, at which point I'm going to be texting and calling them. And they were very clear about the fact that they were there to help out, even on the weekend, as if things don't go exactly as planned. So I'm deeply grateful for that.
For the whole weekend?
That's what they said, yeah. And I sure hope I don't have to
want to get him a Ethernet switch with some high-dye optics. So, back up.
Hey,
Actually,
by the way, Doug, your beard and your tie-dye look really sharp today, by the way. I've noticed it looks like your beard has gotten brushed out, and the tie-dye. Just saying.
I'm starting to reshape the Santa beard. Thank you.
Nice.
See?
Nice.
Like the lady notices, shocking enough.
Sorry,
All right.
Doug, I didn't notice, so yeah.
Well, we are we're going to look at being back in 2 weeks or so. Always happy to hear comments, thoughts on what we should include. We do have a list of topics I've been trying to work through, but always interested to hear what else people would like us to talk about. But once again, thank you, Kim. Thank you, Doug. You're welcome, Travis. Just kidding.
A final thought of the day. Kim, I'm very disappointed I didn't see Mr. Ajit Pai, because I would have personally gone up and thanked him for the 6 gigahertz spectrum.
If you could have gotten a selfie, Travis.
Yeah.
I did see him at Metro Connect in like having a meeting, and you weren't around there. Like when you weren't around when I saw him, Travis, or I would have gone and found you and like brought you up to him.
Mr. Pai for the 6 gigahertz spectrum. Game changer for the community. I'll leave you with that, Mr. Mitchell.
I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. This has been I should say also thank you, Gigi, for being on the show, bringing us another level of insight. But we will be back. This has been a wonderful episode of Connect This.